Okay, so as you know, I'm Amanda Steer, and most of you have met me over the past. And so I'm a printmaker and illustrator, and today I'm going to talk about using the medium of illustration as a means to connect. So I just go over quickly about my background, really, because I've just come to illustration well, I've always illustrated, but as a career recently. So I've made notes so that I don't go fumbling off. So despite a lifelong dream of being a fashion designer, my journey began by leaving school at 16, working in office jobs, category, insurance, civil service, until I went on to study A-level art and then went full-time to study foundation art in Bristol, HND in fashion design in Cheltenham, and then finished off doing fashion and textiles in Liverpool, where I gained a first-class honours degree. Went straight into work from here as a sportswear designer with Guy Mathieu Design, and that was very much research-based. I then moved on to a designer of corporate wear, again, research-based clothing, functional clothing at Alexandra Workwear, where I became head of conceptual design. And then that was before moving to Cheltenham and going freelance until I stepped back to raise my family in about 2004. So I undertook voluntary roles since then, whilst raising my family until they were more independent. And then I took on a role as teaching assistant, where I continued to work 2 days a week. In 2019, I began my MA in illustration, and I hope the following helps to demonstrate my work. So if you bear with me, I shall open my thing, which hopefully will all work. Okay, so for my master's, I did a practice-based final major project in which I collaborated with Cleeve Common Trust. I was inspired by a Robert Macfarlane quote, which is, "We will not save what we do not love, and we rarely love what we cannot name or do not see." So walking, listening, looking and talking enables me to connect to a place, making sense of all that I see and hear, and I record my findings through drawing. This helps me to understand a place's physical and cultural values. So I'm going to show you some examples of sketchbook pages from walking and talking with various Cleeve Common Trust experts. So this first slide is a snippet of a page which is a watercolour pencil sketch, which was a really hot day up on Cleeve Common with the conservationists and the volunteers clearing gorse. Next one is taken from walks and talks with the ornithologist on the common, and I used here, you can see, using my sketches to understand the difference between the tree, meadow pipit, skylark, and so on. So next one is observations of flora and fauna found on the common. So I kind of journal and sketch in my sketchbooks, and then I use that information. So I walked and talked with the trust and members of the public and created 6 limited edition lino prints, with each composition is 70 by 50 centimetres, and it's inspired by these conversations. There's like loads of information in there, which I won't go through now. And I then made these into an artist book, and you can see a few more of the linos here. And I added the words that I picked up and the research and so on. So my illustrations are being used by the trust as information in the form of maps, interpretation boards, social media correspondence. And so I was really pleased with the outcome of my project. And as you can see here, it's exactly what my objective was, to use my artwork as a form of connection. And you can see here my map, well muddied and used, up on outside Warden's Wood on Cleeve Common. So that's really nice. And then the following examples I'm going to show you have been developed post or during my master's. Most of them were initiated in addition to my university modules. So the first one I'm going to start with is the Climathon, and I was invited to the day's meeting where I took lots of notes and did some sketching, which I then worked on digitally to produce this overview of the day. So this is very much about communicating a huge meeting that went on. And the question of the day was, how might we optimise food, farming and land use in the Cotswold district to help achieve net zero? Along the bottom was the brainstorming, and then it was split into groups in the afternoon. So loads of detail in there. Next, I've got an example of a collaboration with We Create, which is a mudlarking publication. My illustrations were used throughout the duration of the mudlarking publication, and my contribution included the recording of the development of a community garden called Field Fair. So I recorded the growth of the garden, the building of the garden, the building of the community, and also the residents interacting through my observational sketches. We went foraging, seed sharing, etc. And then I inked them up and composed them in a program called Procreate and InDesign. And then also we grew hops and things. And on the right-hand side, there are many, many pages because it went throughout the year. But on the right-hand side, I've just illustrated how I've done like a recipe for turning the hops into beer. So they're just a few examples of that. So inspired by this, I also got involved at the school where I work in the development of a primary school garden, which was a project for bereaved children with Winston's Wish, and it's called Growing Hope. So here are some examples of hand illustrated observational sketches, which I then worked on in Procreate the same way as previous. And these are an example of just a few of the pages throughout that year. And the journal was completed throughout the year, following the children engaging in the life cycles of nature as they built and tended the garden. I presented all of the children with a copy of the journal, and I continue to volunteer and encourage connection. This cohort have now moved on, and we've developed this after school club into a nurture in nature where we do journaling, gardening and other crafts inspired by nature, learning to look and be in nature, and which has proven benefits for people's well-being. So then here, I spoke about this briefly last week. And it's an example of a collaboration with Andrew Moxon, who's a photography lecturer at University of Gloucestershire. So my illustrations were used to explore time and space through the mammoth, which last walked on Earth 5,000 years ago. So Andrew used the light of a 5,000-year-old star. It's a huge project he's working on. He went down to Dartmoor, where he developed my illustrations in Dartmoor to be played at 33 revs per minute, viewed at 33 frames per second, which is through an iPhone, and then on a phenakistoscope to see the mammoths be brought back to life. We used my inked illustrations of mammoths in Photoshop and Illustrator to create a working phenakistoscope, which is like a spins around and they come to life. And I also illustrated the information for the disc presentation, which is like an LP gatefold sleeve. And there's just a corner of that where it explains the project on the right-hand side. And this is the one I mentioned last week, because I heard over Christmas that it's actually exhibited in over Christmas. I don't know if it still is, the Shui Photo Biennial Festival in China. So that was really nice to hear. That was on New Year's Day. I heard about that. New Year's Eve, sorry. So last but not least slide. I could go on. Here is a selection of artifact pen and ink drawings made into postcards in collaboration with Ledbury Lifestyle. So I used my illustrations to document examples of artifacts held in the private garden museum, tools museum. And we worked on this around COVID times when people were exchanging seeds and sending them through the post. So that was a really nice thing to work on as well. And so I would describe myself as an illustrator and printmaker, and I can adapt my illustration medium depending on the outcome required. But I always begin by exploring through analog drawing. So a few of my 2023 highlights are on here. So I had my graduate exhibition last March, and yeah, so quite a few things on there which I've been really pleased with the way that since graduating, the way that things have gone. And then I've got some bookings coming up for 2024 with, again, more Climathon illustrations to do. And I've also I spoke about the Royal Horticultural Society in 3 counties. That's tomorrow. I go there to do a recce. Got a residency coming up in Stanford Park Slido for this summer season, so I'm looking forward to that. So if you go to the Cheltenham, you'll see me. I'll probably be there on a Friday morning, I think, after my swim, to gather stories like I did on the Common. I'd like to gather stories and create work from that. So how can illustration help your business? So illustration creates an emotive response to information. So I use my illustration skills to record and share information visually to help engage and connect an audience. So I create my information through observing and journaling, which is a lovely way to immerse and connect with nature, and also our surroundings and sense of place. I can offer workshops as well to share this approach, as it's, as I said, proven way for people's well-being. So thank you for your time. Does anybody have any questions?